So now we're going to take a look at the barriers to breast screening. So you might recognize a lot of them as having a bit of crossover with bowel screening. So I think a lot of them universally will be about lack of accessible information, lack of easy read, and lack of knowledge around that for the person with a learning disability and the person that will care for them. But there are a couple that are very specific to breast screening. For example, the physical mobility barriers that we've mentioned on the slide. We'll get into this later, but as an overview, people in wheelchairs might have to go to slightly different places than people that aren't in wheelchairs. Similarly, there are lots of myths and misunderstandings around who is eligible and who isn't eligible for breast screening. And a lot of people with a learning disability have kind of all been lumped together as people that aren't eligible. So people might have received some poor advice in the past. So we've really got to work together to try and dispel some of those myths and make sure people are getting the right information. So we're going to go and dive into some of the ways that we can get around these barriers to breast screening. So similarly to bowel screening, we're looking at how can we support the process of breast screening for people with a learning disability with accessible information. So that means things like getting easy read invitations straight from the screening hub themselves to the person with a learning disability so that the first point of contact that they have is accessible, so we're not kind of putting people off from the very start. Or it could be within your scope of practice a follow-up letter. So if somebody's received an invitation from the breast screening hub, could we send a follow-up letter from a GP practice, so someone they know and trust, with details about breast screening, what it is, what the invitation means, and just offering another point of contact for them to come and ask questions and be guided through the process. Macmillan and other places online have really good, easy read information booklets that are completely free to download and order a physical copy of. So it could be good to have copies of those around. So when they come in for other things, if they come in for an annual health check, someone comes in to see a social prescriber, you can offer them bits of information to take away. It could also be something that's not even written information. So these could be things like videos. So Cancer Research have done some videos online about what breast screening is. Lots of other people have done things on YouTube about what breast screening is, what happens, and what they can expect. You could also even talk to your screening hub about whether they'd be able to film a video within their premises so that we can see the process of going in from the car park, where they'd go, where they'd wait, what the equipment looks like, who the staff are, just to help build up that familiarity. So if we're thinking about reasonable adjustments specifically for breast screening, suppose what reasonable adjustments might help somebody with a learning disability? So it's important to ask and check with the person because they might have some reasonable adjustments that work for them in other appointments. But with the nature of breast screening, because it can be such an anxiety-inducing thing on its own, and it being so different from most of healthcare, things that they might not need in some spaces, they might need in other spaces. So it's always good to check in whether there's anything they might specifically need for breast screening. So some general ideas of things that could help would be longer appointments. Somebody might need more time to process what's happening, what's being said to them, and what they need to do. They could also want to bring somebody with them to stay with them through the whole procedure. Some people in the past have brought friends or their mum, their sister, and they've had kind of double appointments. So they've seen their mum, their sister, or their friend have their mammogram, and then they've gone afterwards, just so they can see what the process looks like. You could offer a different waiting room space. So if somebody's coming to the screening hub and they struggle with crowded spaces, loud spaces, we can always offer them maybe a quieter room to wait in, or they could wait in their car and be called in when it's their turn. We can allow somebody to visit and have a look around, so a no pressure appointment to come, have a look around the screening service, just gather information, and then go home again, and then make the decision with that new information about whether they want to proceed or not. In that same idea, screening hopes to hold desensitization days and allow people to come in, have a look around, and just learn more in their own time without having that added pressure of knowing it will end in the screening test is a fantastic idea. And doing those quite regularly can help build up people's confidence so they'll know where they're coming already, they'll know who they're going to be speaking to when they get there. And it's just a great way of just building up that familiarity to hopefully lead someone towards success on the journey of trying to get their cancer screening done. And as we've spoken about in the Easy Read information, video walkthroughs are always a great idea to give someone a bit of an insight into the space and can really build confidence in that same way. So Sean's going to jump in and talk about reasonable adjustments and how we should maybe approach talking to somebody about their reasonable adjustments.
Readjustment is a good thing, but you got to make sure to ask them what works for them. Everybody with reading adjustment is different. Like myself, in the past, I used to get letters, but I keep missing my appointments, couldn't read them. And I had a meeting about that, and and in the end, I got text messages. They asked me, "Do you understand text messages?" Yes, because I can read it on my phone. Because they're big enough writing, and I got a pale colour background. That worked for me, but it might not work for a person. It might not work for other people. That's why when you do real judgment, you need to ask them what worked for them. Like me, I got pale green. That worked for me if I got any letters, but it might not work for anybody else. If they got dyslexia, green might not work for them. Yellow might work for them. You got always need to check the person about what type of reading judgment works for them. Don't be lazy and guess the same. We are different.
Physical accessibility, as we've said, can be a huge barrier to somebody accessing breast screening. For a lot of people, they've been told that if they're in a wheelchair, that they 100% can't have breast screening, which is not the case for everybody. So some people in a wheelchair can access breast screening at specific locations. So if somebody has mobility issues, for instance, if they are in a wheelchair, if they can't do stairs, if they use mobility aids, then maybe one of the mobile screening services would not be the best fit, as that won't be accessible for them. However, the hospital locations may be more accessible for that person, and they may be able to access breast screening. So it's important to check with the breast screening service itself if your specific person that you're talking about would be able to access breast screening, or if there's a way that we could make that work instead of them being told outright that they won't be able to do it. So it's always best to check. This map that we have on our website shows the accessible locations for people to have their breast screening. As you can see, it's got all of the mobile centres there as well, and we've highlighted the two main wheelchair accessible sites, which could be helpful to show somebody, as if someone gets an invite, they'll be able to see which ones are accessible and which ones aren't. But it's always best to check with the service that somebody is going to, just to sort out accessibility agreements. It's always great to note down as well if somebody needs a reasonable adjustment for their physical accessibility needs, and if we can pass that on to the breast screening services, then they'll be best placed to give somebody advice around what's most appropriate for them and to make those reasonable adjustments themselves. So another barrier to breast screening for a person with a learning disability might be the Mental Capacity Act if it's misused. So often people with a learning disability, it's assumed of them that they don't have the capacity to make a choice, which is obviously wrong. If they maybe don't have the capacity to make a choice in a different area of their life, that is often blanketed across every decision, and the phrase "that person doesn't have capacity" will be thrown around for everything really without a proper capacity assessment being made. Now obviously if there's doubt about someone's mental capacity, they should be assessed. But we shouldn't just assume if someone has a learning disability, then that automatically means that they don't have capacity. It's also really important to look at how we're doing the capacity assessments and if we're setting someone up to fail in that instance. Because if somebody doesn't have the information given to them to make that decision about the pros, the cons, what it is, what's expected of them, if they don't have that information in a way that they can access it, so like the accessible information we've been talking about, then they're really already on the back foot of being able to engage with that capacity assessment, because we'd be expecting them to know information that we've given them in a way that they can't access. It's also good to look at how are we doing the capacity assessment, where is it being done? So is it somewhere that's very unfamiliar to the person, so they're already going to be quite stressed, and therefore the capacity assessment's not going to be as successful as it can. It's just really important that we give somebody every chance to prove that they're making an informed choice and that they do have the capacity to make the decision before we decide that they don't have the capacity. And then afterwards, if we have decided somebody doesn't have the capacity, we need to make sure that a robust best interest decision is being done. So are we taking into account what that person wants and what their wishes are? Are we including them in it? The people that person has close to them in their care network, so things like parents, care support workers, anyone that could input into making this decision. And then are we looking at the risk that we're trying to lessen, and what could we do? So if breast screening in that instance, in that period of time, isn't right for that person, what could we do as a care network to maybe lessen that risk in other ways? Things like, are we training the person themselves and the care support network to be looking out for signs and symptoms? What exactly are we looking for? Are we maybe working on a plan to try and help that person engage with breast screening, even if it's things like offering chances to go and look around, offering better links with the breast screening service itself? So a no now isn't a no forever. It could be a no and. So no and what are we all doing to help get this person further along in their journey, whether that be moving towards screening or looking at ways that we can keep that person safe in other ways. So now we're going to hear from Sean, and he's going to talk to you about when you're doing that mental capacity assessment, and when you're talking to somebody about screening, what should we think about and how should we really approach that conversation, and what are some things to keep in the back of our mind?
When people with learning disability go for appointments about screening, you need to explain to them in a way they can understand. Don't guess if they can understand or not, and don't talk to them like kids. You need to ask them what the best way they can take it in. People like myself take information. It take me longer to understand it, but I do understand it in the end. You just need to let us take our time and understand what you're saying to when you explain about screaming, because this is very important, but we want to be treated as an equal when you're talking to us.